The Great Hall of the Galactic Concord had stood for 12,000 years. Its walls were made from the compressed dust of dead stars, its ceiling stretched so high that clouds sometimes formed. Beneath it, the hall had seen empires rise and fall. It had witnessed treaties that saved billions of lives and declarations of war that ended just as many. Today it would witness something new. Today it would judge humanity. Ambassador Chen Wei stood at the center of the hall. She was a small woman with gray streaks in her black hair. Her uniform was simple and dark blue. She wore no medals or decorations. Around her, ranged in a massive circle, sat the representatives of the 12 elder species of the galaxy. The Velry were there, their crystalline bodies catching the light and splitting it into rainbows. The Morvan attended, their forearm arms folded across their broad chests, their faces unreadable. The KE had sent their hive speaker, a creature that looked like a mantis made of shadow. The Drakesea representative floated in a tank of purple liquid, its tentacles pressing against the glass. All 12 species had ruled the galaxy for longer than humans had existed as a species. They had built the hyperspace lanes. They had established the trade routes. They had created the laws that governed 1,000 worlds, and now they had gathered to pass judgment on Earth. High Chancellor Voreth of the Vel rose from his seat. His body chimed like bells as he moved. He was ancient even by the standards of his long-lived species. He had seen humanity take its first steps into space. He had watched them spread across their solar system. He had observed them discover the hyperspace lanes and join the galactic community 40 years ago. He had never trusted them. The Conquered recognizes the matter before us today, Vor announced. His voice echoed through the hall. The question of humanity's continued membership in the galactic community. Sheni kept her face calm. She had known this day would come. Humanity had always been different from the other species. They grew too fast. They changed too quickly. They asked too many questions and accepted too few answers. The Morvan representative stood next. His name was Grath, and he was a warrior who had fought in 17 campaigns across the galaxy. He looked down at the small human woman with something like pity. Let the charges be read, he said. A holographic display appeared in the center of the hall. It showed charts and graphs and numbers. It showed the growth of human population over the past 40 years. It showed the spread of human colonies. It showed the increase in human trade, human influence, human presence across the galaxy. In 40 years, Voroth said, humanity has expanded to 47 worlds. They have established trade relationships with over 200 species. Their population has grown by 300%. Their technology has advanced at a rate 17 times faster than the galactic average. Sheni listened in silence. Everything Voreth said was true. Humans did grow fast. They did spread quickly. It was simply their nature. Furthermore, Voreth continued, human cultural influence has begun to affect other species in troubling ways. The youth of the Turthy have begun wearing human clothing. The Phoenix have started playing human music in their sacred halls. The Vry have adopted human business practices that prioritize profit over tradition. Chenny almost smiled at that last one. The Vraxi had asked human merchants to teach them those practices. They had been grateful for the help. The Conquered has watched humanity with growing concern, Vor said. You are not like us, you do not respect the old ways, you do not honor the traditions that have kept the galaxy stable for thousands of years. You change everything you touch. The HFY speaker made a clicking sound that the translator rendered as agreement. Humans are a disruption, it said. They upset the balance, they make other species restless and dissatisfied. They breed like vermin, the Drakesea representative added, its tentacles writhing. Soon they will outnumber us all. Chenny finally spoke. Her voice was calm and steady. May I address the conquered? Vorith nodded. You may. Everything you have said is true, Chenny said. We do grow quickly, we do chain things, we do influence the species around us, but I would ask the conquered to consider something. In 40 years has humanity ever started a war? Silence fell over the hall. Has humanity ever broken a treaty? Chenny continued. Has humanity ever stolen from another species? Has humanity ever threatened or attacked any member of this conquered? More silence. We have been good neighbors, Chenny said. We have traded fairly, we have kept our promises, we have helped when we were asked for help. Our only crime is being different from you. Vor's crystalline body flickered with irritation. Your crime is being dangerous, not today, not tomorrow, but in 100 years and 1,000. You will outgrow us all, you will replace us. This is simple mathematics. You fear what we might become, Chenny said quietly. Not what we are. Fear is wisdom when facing the unknown, Voroth replied. The conquered has discussed this matter for many years. We have watched, we have waited, we have hoped that humanity would slow down, that you would learn to fit in, but you have not. You cannot. It is not in your nature. He paused and looked around at the other representatives. One by one they nodded. The conquered will now vote on the matter of humanity's exile from galactic society, Vorith announced. Shen Wei watched as each representative cast their vote. The V3 voted for exile. The Morvan voted for exile. The Keth voted for exile. The Draxi voted for exile. One after another, the elder species condemned humanity to isolation. Only the Phoenix voted against their representative, a small creature covered in silver fur, looked at Chenny with sorrow in its large eyes. I am sorry, it whispered. I try to change their minds. Chenny nodded in thanks. The vote is 11-1, Vor announced. Humanity is hereby exiled from the galactic community. All hyperspace lanes to the Sol system will be closed. All trade agreements are terminated. All communication networks will be severed. Humanity will be alone. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Other species in the gallery whispered among themselves. Many had expected humanity to fight, to argue, to threaten, or beg. Chen, we did none of those things. We understand, she said simply. Vor seemed surprised. You do not wish to appeal. You do not wish to present additional arguments. Would it change anything? Vorith hesitated. No, it would not. Then we understand, Chen Wei repeated. She bowed slightly to the conquered. Humanity thanks the elders species for 40 years of membership. We wish you well. She turned and walked out of the great hall. Her footsteps echoed in the stunned silence. No shouting, no tears, no anger, just quiet dignity. Behind her, the conquered representatives exchanged confused looks. This was not how exiled species were supposed to behave. The Turthy had wept for days when they were sanctioned. The Varaxi had threatened war when they were fine, but humanity simply accepted the judgment and walked away. Within an hour, every human ship in the sector received a message. The message was short and clear. It contained a single word: home. Within 2 hours, human stations began powering down. Human merchants began closing their shops. Human doctors began packing their equipment. Human teachers said goodbye to their students. Within 6 hours, the first human ships began moving toward the solar system. The galaxy had never seen anything like it. There was no chaos, no panic, no desperate scrambling. Every human seemed to know exactly what to do and where to go. Withdrawal was organized, efficient, and calm. Ambassador Cheney returned to her ship and watched the stars slide past as they entered hyperspace. Her aide, a young man named Thomas, sat beside her. "Ma'am," he said quietly, "did we really have a plan for this?" Chenwei smiled. It was a sad smile, but there was something else in it too, something that might have been relief. "We always have plans," she said. "Humans learned long ago that you should never rely on the kindness of others. We hoped we would be accepted. We prepared for the possibility that we would not. What happens now?" Cheney looked out at the swirling colors of hyperspace. Earth was waiting for them. Home was waiting for them. "Now we go home," she said. "And we see what humanity can become when it stands alone." Thomas nodded slowly. "They think they've punished us?" "Yes, have they?" Chenwei was quiet for a long moment. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft but certain. "They have set us free." The ship flew on through the void, carrying its passengers toward a future that no one in the galaxy could predict. Behind them, the galactic Concord congratulated itself on solving the human problem. They had no idea what they had done. 6 months had passed since the Concord voted to exile humanity. In that time, the galaxy had watched something unprecedented unfold. Species that faced exile usually resisted. They protested, they sabotaged, they made the process as difficult and painful as possible. They clung to what they had built and refused to let go. Humanity did none of those things. Trade Minister Vex of the KTH watched the data streams with growing confusion. His compound eyes processed hundreds of reports simultaneously. Every single one told the same story. The humans were leaving quietly, peacefully, completely on the planet Verith Prime. The human medical team had trained local doctors to continue their work. They had left behind detailed instructions. They had organized their supplies neatly. Then they had boarded their ship and departed with smiles and handshakes. In the Morvan sector, human engineers had completed every project they had started. They had fixed the broken systems. They had filed their final reports. They had even left gifts for their colleagues. Small things: books, music, photographs of Earth on a 100 worlds and 1,000 stations. The story was the same. Humans said their goodbyes. They thanked everyone for the opportunity to work together. They expressed hope for the future, and then they left. There was no bitterness, no anger, no resentment. That was what frightened Rex the most. He clicked his mandibles together and pulled up a communication channel to High Chancellor Vorath. The Valkyrie leader appeared on the screen, his crystalline form glowing with inner light. "You have seen the reports?" Vex asked. "I have," Vor replied. His voice was calm, but Vex could hear uncertainty beneath it. "The Withdrawal is proceeding exactly as they announced. It is to clean, Vex said. Too organized. They are not acting like a species that has been wronged. They are acting like a species that expected this. Voreth was silent for a moment. Perhaps they are simply more civilized than we expected, or perhaps they are playing a longer game than we can see. The communication ended, but the anise remained. Rex had dealt with many species over his centuries of life. He understood pride and anger and desperation. He did not understand this quiet acceptance on the edge of human space. A convoy of ships made its final journey toward Seoul. Captain Ciro Conquo stood on the bridge of the transport vessel horizon and watched the stars drift past. Her ship carried 3,000 humans, families, workers, dreamers, all of them heading home. A young girl tugged at her sleeve. Her name was Mai, and she was 8 years old. She had been born on a station near the Fennec home world. She had never seen Earth. Captain Mai asked, "Why are we leaving?" Sarah knelt down so she could look the girl the eyes. "Because we were asked to leave, but we didn't do anything wrong." "No, we didn't. Then why do we have to go?" Sarah thought about the question. She thought about all the answers she could give. Because the galaxy fears us. Because we grew too fast. Because they see what we might become and it terrifies them. Instead, she said something simpler. Sometimes people don't want you around. She told Mai, even if you haven't done anything wrong, and when that happens, you have two choices. You can stay where you're not wanted and be miserable, or you can leave and find somewhere better. Is Earth better? Sarah smiled. Earth is home, and home is always better. Mai seemed satisfied with this answer. She ran off to join the other children in the observation deck. They were playing a game, laughing and shouting as children do everywhere in the galaxy. Sarah watched them for a moment. These children would grow up on a world they had never seen. They would learn to live under an open sky instead of a metal ceiling. They would run through forests and swim in oceans and climb mountains. Maybe exile was not such a terrible thing after all. Back on the Concord's capital world, the final human embassy was closing its doors. Ambassador Chenwei supervised the process personally. Every document was filed, every record was archived, every piece of furniture was carefully packed. A delegation of Phoenix waited outside. Their leader, a diplomat named Sana, watched with tears in her large eyes. The Phoenix had always been friendly with humanity. They had voted against the exile. They had protested the decision. But they had not left the Concord. Solidarity. Chenwei noticed them and walked over. She bowed politely, as was the Fennec custom. Ambassador Sulana said, her voice trembling, "I am so sorry. We tried to change their minds. We argued for days, but the elder species would not listen." "I know," Chenny said gently. "We do not blame you. We should have done more." "What more could you do? You are one voice among 12. The Concord has made its decision, and we respect that decision." Sana shook her head. "How can you be so calm? They are cutting you off from everything. From trade, from travel, from communication. You will be alone." Chenny smiled. It was a warm smile, genuine and kind. "We have always been alone," she said. "For most of our history, we thought we were the only intelligent species in the universe. We looked up at the stars and saw only emptiness. We survived, we thrived, we built great civilizations and explored the depths of our own world." She placed a hand on Sana's shoulder. Humans know how to be alone, she said. It is not a punishment for us. It is simply a return to what we know. Sana wiped her eyes with a silver-furred hand. Will we ever see you again? Perhaps if the galaxy ever wants us back. The last human transport lifted off from the conquered capital an hour later. Chenny watched through the window as the planet shrank. Below them, it was a beautiful world. She had spent 10 years there. She had made friends. She had built relationships. She had worked hard to earn the galaxy's trust. None of it had mattered in the end, but she was not bitter. That was the strange thing. She had expected to feel angry or sad or defeated. Instead, she felt something like peace. The humans had tried their best to fit in. They had followed the rules. They had respected traditions. They had done everything right, and still they had been rejected, not because of anything they did, but because of what they were. There was a freedom in that rejection. If being perfect was not enough, then there was no point in trying to please the conquered. Humanity could finally be itself. The convoy reached the Sol system 3 days later. As they approached the boundary, they passed through the last hyperspace beacon. It was already powering down. Behind them, the lane would collapse. No ship would be able to follow. Sarah stood on the bridge of the horizon and watched the beacon go dark. Around her, the crew was silent. This was it, the final moment. The door closing behind them. All hands, she announced over the ship's communication system. We are entering the Sol system. We are home. A cheer went up from somewhere in the ship, then another. Soon the whole vessel was ringing with voices, laughter, singing, tears of joy. They had been cast out. They had been rejected. They had been told they were not wanted, and somehow, impossibly, they were happy. On Earth, crowds gathered to watch the ships arrive. Millions of people stood in parks and on rooftops and on beaches. Looking up at the sky, they watched the convoy descend through the atmosphere, each ship trailing fire like a meteor. The first ship landed in Shanghai, the second in Nairobi, the third in Sao Paulo. Across the planet, humans welcomed their lost children home. There were no speeches, no ceremonies, no grand declarations, just families reuniting, friends embracing strangers, helping strangers. The galaxy had thrown humanity away. Humanity had caught itself. In the weeks that followed, a message went out from Earth. It was broadcast on every frequency, in every language, aimed at every corner of the galaxy that might still be listening. This is a message from the people of Earth. We have returned home as ordered. We respect the conquered's decision. We hold no anger and seek no revenge. We wish all the species of the galaxy peace and prosperity. The message paused, then it continued. We will remember the kindness shown to us. We will remember the friendships we made, and if any species ever needs our help, they need only ask. A final pause. The door to Earth will always be open, even if the door to the galaxy is closed. Then silence. The message repeated once an hour for 7 days, then it stopped. Barrier of automated stations surrounded the Sol system, forming a shell of sensors and transmitters. Any ship that approached would receive a simple message: humanity respects the conquered's decision. We wish you well. Nothing else. The galaxy waited for anger that never came. They waited for revenge that was never sought. They waited for humanity to show its true nature, but Humanity had already shown its true nature. The elder species simply had not recognized it. In the great hall of the conquered, High Chancellor Voreth reviewed the final reports. The exile was complete. Humanity was contained. The threat was neutralized. He should have felt triumphant. Instead, he felt hollow. What do we do now? The Phoenix representative asked quietly. Vor looked at the empty space where the human delegation had once stood. Now we wait, he said, and we watch. He did not say what he was watching for. He did not know himself, but something told him that the story of humanity was far from over. The stars continued to spin. The galaxy continued to turn, and on a small blue world, hidden behind a wall of silence, humanity began to build something new. 3 years had passed since humanity's exile, and the galaxy was beginning to notice something strange. It was not a dramatic change. There were no explosions or invasions or obvious disasters. It was something quieter, something that crept in slowly, like water seeping through cracks in a wall. Things were falling apart. On Varith Prime, the hospitals were struggling. The human doctors had left behind excellent training and detailed instructions, but the Varadi physicians had never dealt with the plague alone. They had always had human colleagues to consult, human minds to puzzle through difficult cases, human hands to share the burden. Now those hands were gone. Dr. Theon looked at the latest mortality reports and felt his 3 hearts sink. The plague was spreading faster than they could treat it. Their best doctors were exhausted. Their supplies were running low, and the human medical techniques they had learned required creativity that the variety struggled to replicate. Humans had an odd way of thinking. They made connections that seemed random until suddenly they worked. They tried things that should not have succeeded but somehow did. They looked at problems sideways instead of straight on. The variety were brilliant scientists, but they were methodical, logical. They followed established procedures. They did not improvise. Plague did not care about procedures. In the KTH asteroid colonies, the situation was worse. The human engineers had maintained systems that the KTH had built centuries ago. These were old systems, complex and temperamental. They required constant adjustment and creative repairs. The K were masters of building things, but they were not masters of fixing things. When something broke, they preferred to replace it entirely. Human engineers had taught them the art of the patch, the workaround, the temporary solution that somehow became permanent. Now the patches were failing, the workarounds were breaking down, the temporary solutions were reaching the end of their temporary lives. Colony 7 lost power for 6 hours. Colony 12 suffered a partial atmosphere failure. Colony 3's water recycling system developed a fault that no one could identify. The hive speaker sent urgent requests to the other elder species for engineering assistance, but the V3 engineers thought differently than humans. The Morvan builders preferred demolition to repair. Draxi had never understood mechanical systems at all. No one could replace what humanity had provided. Far from Keth space, on the border between Draxi and Morvan territory, the old hatred was burning again. For a century the two species had argued over a cluster of mineral-rich worlds. The dispute had led to 3 wars and countless skirmishes. Then human diplomats had arrived. They had listened to both sides. They had found common ground that neither species had seen. They had negotiated a sharing agreement that gave each party something they wanted while taking something they could afford to lose. The peace had held for 30 years. Now the human diplomats were gone and old grudges were rising to the surface. Ambassador Kreth of the Morvan slammed his fists on the negotiating table. The Draxi violate the agreement daily. They harvest resources beyond their allocated zones. The Draxi representative bubbled with rage in its tank. The Morvan send warships through our sectors without notification. They intimidate our miners. There was no human voice to calm them down, no human mind to find the middle path, no human patience to outlast their anger. The negotiations collapsed. Both species withdrew their ambassadors. Military fleets began to mobilize. In the halls of the conquered, High Chancellor Vorath watched the reports pile up with growing concern. He had expected some disruption. After humanity's exile, changes always caused friction, but he had not expected this. The humans had been everywhere. They had their fingers in everything. Trade routes that had run smoothly for decades were now plagued by delays, because human merchants had been the ones keeping schedules coordinated. Manufacturing networks were breaking down because human logistics experts had been the ones managing supply chains. Scientific research had slowed because human researchers had been the ones making unexpected breakthroughs. Vorath called an emergency session of the conquered. The 12 representatives gathered in the Great Hall, but the mood was different now. 3 years ago they had been confident, united, certain that exiling humanity was the right decision. Now there was doubt. The Kef colonies require immediate assistance. The Hive speaker reported, our infrastructure is failing. We request engineers from any species willing to help. The Morvan and Draxi are on the brink of war. Grath added grimly, our diplomats cannot resolve the dispute. We request mediation from a neutral party. Vareth Prime reports a 17% increase in plague mortality. The Verat representative announced, our medical systems are overwhelmed. We request pharmaceutical supplies and personnel. One by one the elder species listed their problems: trade disruptions, infrastructure failures, diplomatic crises, medical emergencies, research stagnation. Vor listened to it all with his crystal body growing dim. The light inside him flickered with each new report. These problems are unrelated to the human exile, he said finally, though his voice lacked conviction. They are coincidental difficulties that would have arisen regardless. The Phoenix representative stood up. Sana had grown bolder since the exile. She had watched her friends leave and had never forgiven the conquered for forcing them away. Coincidental, she said, all of them at the same time in systems where humans were most active. The galaxy is complex. Vor replied, events cluster. This is normal. Sana repeated, tell me, High Chancellor, when was the last time you had a human doctor check your systems? When was the last time a human engineer optimized your communication networks? When was the last time a human merchant delivered supplies to your outer colonies ahead of schedule? Because they knew you would need them before you knew yourself. Vor did not answer. Humans did not conquer us, Sana continued. They did not threaten us. They did not demand power or territory or tribute. They simply helped. Everywhere they went, they helped, and We were so busy fearing what they might become that we never noticed what they were. And what were they? The Drakesea representative asked. Sana's silver fur bristled. They were the glue holding everything together. They were the hands fixing the things we did not even know were broken. They were the voices calming the fights we were too proud to stop ourselves. She looked around the great hall at the assembled representatives. We were not exiling a threat, she said. We were amputating a limb, and now we are bleeding. Silence fell over the hall. The elder species looked at each other with expressions that might have been shame. What do you suggest? Vor asked quietly. I suggest we admit we made a mistake. We cannot simply reverse the exile. The decision was made by formal vote. It would take yours too. I did not say reverse it, Sana interrupted. I said admit it to ourselves, because until we do, we will keep pretending that these problems are coincidences instead of consequences. She sat down. The silence stretched on. Finally, Voreth spoke. The conquered will take the matter under advisement. It was a bureaucratic non-answer, and everyone knew it, but something had shifted in the room. A crack had appeared in the certainty that had driven humanity away. On the outer rim of the galaxy, far from conquered space, a small ship approached the barrier around the solar system. It was not a warship or a diplomatic vessel. It was a medical transport from Vareth Prime, carrying patients that the local hospitals could no longer treat. The pilot knew she was breaking the law. The Conquered had forbidden all contact with humanity, but her patients were dying, and she had heard stories that human doctors never turned anyone away, stories that they healed people regardless of species or politics. She hoped the stories were true. The automated warning played as she approached the barrier. Humanity respects the Conquered's decision. We wish you well. She ignored it and kept flying. A second message came. This one was different. Medical vessel from Vareth Prime. We see you're carrying patients in critical condition. Please proceed to the following coordinates for treatment. Do not be afraid. All are welcome here. The pilot wept as she entered the coordinates. Behind her patients stirred in their beds. Where are we going? One of them asked weakly. Home, the pilot said, though she did not know why she used that word. We are going home on Earth. The medical teams prepared for the new rivals. They did not ask about politics or allegiances. They did not check if the patient's species had voted for or against exile. They simply cleared beds and readied equipment and did what humans had always done. They helped because that was what they were. That was what they had always been. The galaxy was finally beginning to understand. 7 years after the exile, a ship appeared at the edge of the Sol system. It was not a medical transport seeking help. It was a diplomatic vessel carrying representatives from 18 species, most of them young races that had joined the Conquered long after the elder species had established their dominion. The ship's captain was a phoenix named Sana. She had resigned her position as Conquered representative 2 years ago. She had grown tired of watching the galaxy fall apart while the elder species pretended nothing was wrong. We are approaching the barrier, her navigator announced. The automated message is playing. Sana listened to the familiar words. Humanity respects the Conquered's decision. We wish you well. Transmit our response, she ordered. Her communications officer sent the message they had prepared. It was Simple and direct, we are not here as representatives of the conquered, we come as friends who wish to speak with humanity. We ask for permission to approach Earth. The response came within minutes. Permission granted, please. Follow the beacon to the designated landing zone. We look forward to seeing you. Sana felt her first stand up with emotion. Even after everything the humans were welcoming them, the ship followed the beacon through the solar system. The delegation pressed against the windows, staring at the sights. Mars was green now, covered in forests and lakes. The asteroid belt was dotted with stations and habitats. Jupiter's moons sparkled with city lights. They have been busy, someone murmured. Busy was an understatement. In 7 years, humanity had transformed their home system. They had built more in isolation than they had built in 40 years as part of galactic society. Earth itself took their breath away. The planet hung in space like a blue and green jewel. Clouds swirled across its surface. Lights glittered on the night side. Ships moved in constant streams between orbital stations and the surface below. It is beautiful, a Turthy representative whispered. It always was, Sana replied. We just never bothered to look. They landed in a field outside a city that the humans called Geneva. A delegation was waiting for them. At its head stood an elderly woman with gray hair and kind eyes. Sulana recognized her immediately. Ambassador Chen. Just Chen we now, the woman replied with a smile. I retired from diplomacy some years ago. These days I mostly garden. You garden? It is peaceful. You should try it sometime. Sana found herself smiling despite her nervousness. She had forgotten this about humans. They could make you feel at ease with a few simple words. The delegation was escorted to a compound outside the city. It was not a government building or a military facility. It was a garden, vast and beautiful, filled with flowers from 100 worlds. Many of these plants had come from species that had traded with humanity before the exile. You kept them, Araxi representative said, touching a flower from his home world. Of course, Chen Wei replied. They were gifts from friends. Why would we discard them? But our government supported your exile. Chenny shrugged. Governments are not people. We never blamed the individuals for what their leaders decided. They walked through the garden until they reached a pavilion. At its center, tables had been set with food and drink from every world represented in the delegation. The humans had prepared a feast to welcome their guests. Please eat, Chenny said. We can talk while we share a meal. That is the human way. Sana had 1,000 questions she wanted to know about humanity's technological advances. She wanted to understand how they had built so much so quickly. She wanted to ask if they were angry, if they were planning revenge, if they intended to return to the galaxy and show the conquered what they had become. Instead, she asked something simpler. Are you happy, Chenny? Consider the question. She poured herself a cup of tea and took a slow sip. Happier than we were before, she said finally. The exile was painful, but it was also liberating. For 40 years we tried to fit into a galaxy that was not made for us. We changed ourselves to please others. We hid our nature to avoid frightening our neighbors. She set down her cup and looked at Solana with clear eyes. Now we are free to be ourselves. We grow as fast as we want. We change as much as we want. We do not have to apologize for what we are. And What are you? Chenny smiled. We are human. That is enough. The meal lasted. For hours, the delegation asked endless questions about humanity's progress. Humans answered patiently, showing holographic displays of their new cities, their new technologies, their new art and music and literature. But what struck the delegation most was not the technology, it was the people. The humans they met were confident but not arrogant, proud but not boastful. They spoke of their achievements with genuine joy, but they also spoke of their failures and struggles. They laughed easily. They asked questions about the visitors' own worlds. They seemed genuinely interested in lives beyond their own. You are not bitter, a Morvan observer said eventually. He was young, not even a warrior yet, and he had come against his government's wishes. The conquered rejected you. They cast you out. They called you dangerous and unwanted. How can you not be bitter? A young human woman answered him. Her name was Maya, and she was an artist who had been born on a space station above Earth. Bitterness is a poison, she said. It does not hurt the people who wronged you, it only hurts yourself. Conquered made a decision based on fear. We could spend our lives being angry about that fear, or we could spend our lives being happy despite it. But they were wrong about you. Yes, does that not make you want to prove it, to show them their mistake? Maya shook her head. Proving things to people who do not want to believe is exhausting. We would rather spend our energy on people who do want to know us, like you. The Morvan fell silent, thinking about her words. As the day wore on, the visitors explored more of Earth. They visited schools where children learned about every species in the galaxy. They toured laboratories where scientists worked on problems that would benefit all intelligent life. They attended a concert where musicians played instruments from a dozen worlds. Everywhere they went, they found the same spirit: openness, curiosity, generosity. The humans had not used their exile to become bitter or vengeful. They had used it to become more fully themselves. On the last evening of their visit, Sana found Chenny alone in the garden. The old woman was tending to a small tree that glowed with inner light. That is a Velry spirit tree, Sulana said. They are very rare. I did not know any existed outside Velry space. High Chancellor Vorath gave me this as a gift 20 years ago, Chenny replied. He said it was a symbol of the light humanity brought to the galaxy. That was before the exile. Yes, and you still keep it. Chenny touched the trees. Bark gently. The tree did nothing wrong. Neither did Vorath in his own mind. He genuinely believed he was protecting his people. He was wrong, but his fear was real. Sana struggled to understand. If someone gave me a gift and then tried to destroy my people, I would burn the gift. Would burning it change anything? Would it undo the exile? Would it heal the hurt? No. Then why burn it? Chenny smiled. The tree is beautiful. It gives me peace. Why should I deny myself peace because of someone else's mistake? Sana was quiet for a long moment. Then she asked the question that had brought her across the galaxy. Would you ever return to galactic society if you were invited? Chenny stopped tending the tree. She stood up slowly, her old bones creaking. That depends on the invitation, she said. What do you mean? We were tolerated before. We were accepted conditionally, as long as we did not grow too fast or change too much. We were a guest in someone else's house, always worried about breaking the rules. She turned to face Sana directly. If we return, we will not return as guests. We will return as equals. We will not hide. What we are, we will not apologize for. Our nature, we will not slow down to make others comfortable. And if the galaxy cannot accept that Chenny and LT, Unk and GTS eyes were gentle but firm, then we will stay here. We are not unhappy, Sana. We have built a good life. We would welcome the galaxy's friendship, but we do not need it. Sana nodded slowly. She understood. The humans had stopped seeking approval. They had stopped measuring themselves by others' acceptance. They had found peace in who they were. What do we tell the conquered? She asked. Tell them the truth, Chen Wei replied. Tell them that humanity is well, that we hold no grudge, that we wish them nothing but prosperity. She paused. And tell them that we will be here if they ever want to talk, not as rulers and subjects, not as judges and defendants, but as neighbors, as equals, as friends. The delegation left the next day. Their ships rose through Earth's atmosphere and flew past the orbital stations and the busy moons and the green fields of Mars. They carried no treaties, no demands, no ultimatums. They carried only an invitation, an open door, a light in the darkness. The galaxy would have to decide whether to walk through it. 15 years had passed since the galactic conquered voted to exile humanity. In that time, the galaxy had changed in ways that no one had predicted. The Morvandry War had lasted 3 years before exhaustion forced both sides to stop fighting. The peace they made was fragile and bitter. There was no resolution, only a pause. The KE asteroid colonies had lost for habitats to infrastructure collapse. Thousands had died. The survivors had been forced to abandon their ancestral homes and crowd into the remaining stations. Vareth Prime had eventually contained the plague, but at a terrible cost. 20 million had perished. The medical system had never fully recovered, and everywhere the cracks were spreading. Trade networks had fractured. Scientific progress had slowed. Old alliances had crumbled while new conflicts erupted. The galaxy that had seemed so stable for so long was falling apart. The galactic conquered still met in its great hall, but the meetings were different now. There was less pride, less certainty. The elder species no longer spoke of their wisdom and experience. They argued about survival. High Chancellor Vorath stood at the center of the hall. He had aged badly. His crystalline body was dull and clouded. The inner light that had once burned so brightly was now barely flicker. We must acknowledge reality, he said. His voice was tired. The galaxy cannot continue on its current path. We need help. The word hung in the air. Help. The elder species had not asked for help in 10,000 years. They were the ones who gave help. They were the ones who knew better. They were the ones who made the rules, but the rules had brought them here, to this hall, to this moment, to this admission of failure. What help can we seek? The KTH hive speaker asked. The younger species lacked the resources. Other elder civilizations are too far away to assist. In time, everyone knew what he was really asking. Everyone knew there was only one source of help that could make a real difference. Vareth forced himself to say the words, we must approach the humans. Silence fell over the hall. Some representatives looked relieved, others looked ashamed. A few looked angry. We exiled them, the Drakesea representative said. We told them they were not wanted. We cut them off from Everything. Why would they help us now? Because they are human, Sana replied. She had returned to the Concord 2 years ago after the younger species had demanded better representation. They helped anyone who asked, even when they had no reason to. They still do. Their medical facilities have treated thousands of patients from species that voted for their exile. Those were unofficial visits. Vor said we need official help, treaties, agreements, cooperation. Then we must offer official apologies. Sana said we must admit we were wrong. The words caused a stir. Elder species did not apologize. They adjusted, they recalibrated, they revised their assessments, but they did not admit mistakes. Voreth closed his eyes, his light flickered dangerously. Then we will apologize, he said. I will apologize personally. The delegation that traveled to Seoul was small. Vor led it himself, accompanied by representatives from each of the elder species. It was the most powerful group of aliens to ever approach Earth. Their ship passed through the barrier without incident. The automated message played same as always. Humanity respects the Concord's decision. We wish you well. Then a new message came. Delegation from the Galactic Concord. You are welcome in the Sol system. Please proceed to the following coordinates. They landed in the same garden where Sana had visited 8 years before. The flowers were larger now, more vibrant. The paths were wider. The pavilion at the center had been expanded to accommodate more guests. Chen Wei was waiting for them. She was very old now. Her hair was completely white. She walked with a cane, but her eyes were as sharp as ever. Voreth approached her. He towered over the small human woman. His crystalline body caught the sunlight and cast rainbows across the grass. Ambassador Chenny, he said formally, I am High Chancellor Voreth of the Velry. I come on behalf of the Galactic Concord. I know who you are, Chenny replied. I remember when you gave me a spirit tree. I still have it. Voreth's light flickered with surprise. You kept it after everything. It is a beautiful tree. Why would I destroy something beautiful? The High Chancellor had no answer for that. They walked together through the garden. Chenny led them, slowly stopping occasionally to point out different plants. Here was a flower from the Morvan home world. There was a shrub from KTH space. Over there was a vine that the Draxi considered sacred. You have collected pieces of the entire galaxy, Vor observed. We have collected pieces of our friends, Chen Wei replied. Even when they stopped being our friends, we remembered what they had given us. They reached the pavilion. Table had been set with refreshments. Chenny sat down heavily in a chair designed for her aging body. So she said, why has the Concord come to Earth? Voreth remained standing. He seemed uncomfortable. His crystalline hands flexed nervously. The galaxy is in trouble, he admitted. Systems are failing. Wars are spreading. Peoples are dying. We have tried to address these problems ourselves, but we have failed. He paused. The next word seemed to cause him physical pain. We were wrong to exile humanity. We made a mistake. I made a mistake. We judged you for what you might become instead of what you were, and in doing so we lost something precious. Chenny listened in silence. Her face showed no triumph or satisfaction. What do you want from us? She asked. We want you to return to rejoin the galactic community to help us rebuild what has been broken and what will be different this time. Voreth hesitated. What do you mean? 15 years ago you Exiled us because we grew too fast. Because we changed too much. Because we were too different from you. Chenny and LT Unk and GTS. Voice was gentle but firm. Have we changed? No, we are still human. We still grow fast. We still change. Everything we touch, will you accept us as we are, or will you exile us again? When we become too successful, the question hung in the air. The elder species representative shifted. Uncomfortably, I cannot promise that. Fear will never return, Voroth said. Finally, I cannot promise that there will never be conflict between our peoples, but I can promise that I have learned. I see now what we threw away. I see the cost of our mistake. He bowed his Christine head. It was a gesture of submission, something novel V3 had done to another species in living memory. We do not deserve your help, he said. We do not deserve your forgiveness, but we are asking anyway because we have nowhere else to turn. Chenny was quiet for a long moment. She looked at the representatives of species that had voted to exile her people. She thought about the years of isolation, the pain of rejection, the struggle to rebuild. Then she thought about the patients who had come seeking human medicine, the refugees who had found shelter in Soul system, the visitors who had left with wonder in their eyes. Humanity does not hold grudges, she said at last. We never have. It is not in our nature. When you hurt us, we did not dream of revenge. We dreamed of the day you would understand. She stood up slowly, leaning on her cane. We will return to the galactic community. We will help rebuild what has been broken. We will share what we have learned in our years of isolation. Voroth's light blazed with relief. Thank you, but Chenny continued, we will not return as we were before. We will not hide our nature. We will not slow our growth to make others comfortable. We will be fully human in all our strange and wonderful ways. We accept that, and we will remember this moment not with bitterness but with hope, because today the galaxy admitted it was wrong. Today the elder species asked for help. Today pride gave way to wisdom. She reached out and took Voroth's crystalline hand in her own. Her small wrinkled fingers looked impossibly fragile against his glittering surface. Today we become true partners, not rulers and subjects, not judges and defendants, but neighbors equals friends. Voroth's light shone brighter than it had in years. Friends, he repeated. The words seemed strange in his mouth, but somehow it felt right. The news spread across the galaxy within hours. Humanity was returning. The exile was over. The door had opened. Ships from Earth began appearing in ports across known space. Human doctors returned to hospitals that had struggled without them. Human engineers returned to stations that had crumbled without them. Human diplomats returned to negotiations that had failed without them. And everywhere they went, they were welcomed not with fear or suspicion, but with joy, with relief, with something that felt like coming home. On Earth, the celebrations lasted for days. Humanity had been cast out and had returned. They had been rejected and had forgiven. They had been alone and had found family. Chen Wei watched the festivities from her garden. She was too old to join the dancing, but she could still appreciate the music. A young girl ran up to her. It was Mai, the child who had asked why they had to leave all those years ago. She was a grown woman, now a doctor who had treated thousands of alien patients. We did it, Mai said, her eyes shining with tears. We really Did it? Jenny smiled and took her hand. We did what humans have always done. She said we survived. We grew, we forgave, and we loved even when love was not returned.